This is my refurbished 64GB Steam Deck. I've had it for a little over 2 months now, and since I took delivery on the 14th of August, I've been playing it a bunch. So, just as I was about to launch this video, I found out that Valve have launched a new Steam Deck. It's the OLED version. So they're still going to sell the LCD version, but that's lowered in price. And in fact, if you want to get the 64GB model, it's at its lowest price ever, brand new, which is £309 in the UK. Although that seems to be while stocks last. Same thing goes for all the other LCD models, they've all dropped in price. It looks like maybe the 256 model is going to be the default LCD option, which is £349 in the UK, with the OLED model starting at £479. What does this mean for the refurbished Steam Deck? Well, that's got even cheaper. For a 64GB refurbished model, that now starts at £249. That's crazy cheap. And even for the biggest 512 version, that's just £319, which is cheaper than the original 64GB model. That said, all of the refurbished models are actually out of stock at the minute, so whether they will or won't go back in stock maybe depends on how many of them get returned or upgraded for the OLED model. So I just thought I'd drop this into the video so that people know that there is actually a new Steam Deck replacing the one that I'm currently showing off in this video. But you can still get it, just even cheaper than before. As a non-PC gamer, I'm used to the console life. In fact, if you're familiar with my channel, you know I predominantly use retro handhelds. Like this is a Gameboy Color with a modded screen, or new consoles that wish they were old consoles, like this. This is the Analogue Pocket. If you want to see more about this console, I've made a video about it and I will link it up here and down here. Even my home consoles are handhelds. For the most part, this means I'm used to using these physical games, which means they're pretty much guaranteed to work every time. This means no tinkering with settings or forcing a particular game to run with a compatibility layer to make sure it will actually work, which I've had to become somewhat familiar with, but more on that in a minute. In fact, for the most part, when you have a problem with one of these, that will do the trick. I was put off getting a Steam Deck for the longest time because, well, it seems huge. And actually, it is. Although, what you might have heard from some other reviewers in the near 18 months since its release is that it's not actually as heavy as you think it might be, and that it's really comfortable to hold. I agree, by the way. Its official stated weight is 669 grams. But to be honest, I think it's more about balance and feel than it is about the specific weight. I personally find the Steam Deck extremely comfortable to hold, even in long play sessions. All the controls seem to be exactly where I want them. Or the main ones do, at least, anyway. I grew up with access to a Mega Drive and a SNES, and then following those, an N64 and a first generation PlayStation. Why is this important? My first experience of dual analog sticks was on the PlayStation 1 DualShock controller. The first console I bought with my own money was the PlayStation 2. I'm used to my analog sticks being on the same plane. And to be honest, I've always found the Xbox layout a little bit uncomfortable, including on the Switch. So to me, the placement of the Steam Deck sticks just seems to make sense. As for the placement of the D-pad and the face buttons, well, they make sense too. It's a small area that each set of controls occupies. But for somebody like me with small hands, that's just fine. That makes it great for reachability, but if you've got big hands, I don't know, maybe you would get a more cramped up experience and it wouldn't be so comfortable. The two touchpad areas are easy to get to and they have amazing haptics, although I will admit I haven't put them to much use, but more on that in a minute. Finally, there are the paddles on the back. They are placed right where your hands normally sit. However, they do take a bit of getting used to because you don't actually press them where you might expect, or at least not where I did anyway. The button area is large and it extends round the grip, but you really only get full operation on the flat part of the back of the console. Again, I haven't used them much, although I would like to start to assign them in more games. The screen resolution is more than adequate in my opinion. It looks sharp and colourful, especially at this size and especially at this distance from your face. quality of the materials and the fit and finish of the device make it feel really premium. Bearing in mind this is a refurbished unit, I'm pretty impressed. Unlike some others, I haven't found even a hairline scratch on my refurbished unit. I'm new to Steam and PC gaming in general, unless of course you count the original Grand Theft Auto that I played on a PC back in the 90s. So I didn't have an extensive Steam library. I haven't bought a ton of games from the outset, choosing mainly to wait for the games that I'm interested in to go on sale, which on Steam seems to happen pretty frequently. I have bought some, however, and it's given me the chance to go back and play some games that I missed the first time round, like Valve's Portal 2 for instance. I know you can get it on the Switch, but it's just passed me by up until this point. And being a Valve game, when I picked it up, it was super cheap, and I'm really glad I did because I've really been enjoying it. I also picked up Crazy Taxi, which is one of my all-time favourite games. I even used to play it on the stand-up arcade machine, and this looks like the Xbox version, and I had the PlayStation 2 version, but to all intents and purposes it plays the same. And to be honest, this was some of the original appeal of getting a Steam Deck in the first place, was revisiting some of those older games. One of which I wanted to dive back into for a while is SimCity. And with the Steam Deck having those touchpads, I thought what better way to play it than on the sofa using the Steam Deck. The last time I was able to do this was with the iPad port SimCity Deluxe, which was actually a great game, but sadly no longer works. Unfortunately, the touchpads proved to be mediocre at best, at least for mouse-heavy games in my opinion. It also requires a number of keyboard shortcuts, and it just wasn't a great experience. You might as well just hook it up to a monitor and play on your PC like you would normally. I've also been playing Hot Wheels Unleashed, Super Monkey Ball, Need for Speed, and one of my all-time favourite PS2 classics, Burnout 3 Takedown. I've already logged over 8 hours in the game, and for the amount of time I actually get to play, that's pretty good for me. You can't talk about playing old titles without talking about emulation. So let's. As far as I can tell, the Steam Deck emulates everything up to and including PS3 and whatever the Xbox was called that week, albeit you might run into some issues with that console generation. Up until now, I have only dabbled in emulation, focusing mainly on those original systems with physical games. So I don't have an extensive ROM library, but I've got a handful. I have a hacked Vita, which I carried out the hack myself. I bought a PSP Go that was already hacked, and I have a Miyoo Mini that's got a bunch of games on it, as well as obviously the Analogue Pocket that's got an FPGA that allows you to emulate games on there too. But that one's mostly still just got Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games on it. If you want to see my full console collection, minus the Steam Deck, because I got it after I made that video, then you can check out this video up here or down in the links below. Of course, the Steam Deck could emulate everything the other consoles can and be a nice all-in-one device. But just because you can, doesn't mean to say that you should. Personally, I prefer to play older systems on a smaller device. Take this for instance, the Game Boy Advance. I could play all the games that I can play on this on the Steam Deck, but to me it just doesn't feel the same. Personally, I don't think the graphics hold up that well on a bigger screen, and I'd far rather play them on a smaller device, either the original, like this one, or I've got a modded one with a nice screen, or something like the Analogue Pocket. It's the same reason why I haven't tried any of these games on the Switch via Switch Online. For me, I've stuck to consoles that were intended to be played on something with a slightly larger screen. I've got a mixture of handheld consoles and home consoles. Again, I've got a small library and I've had limited success running some of those systems. I've got PSP, PS1, PS2, some Xbox, a little Dreamcast, and that's all running through Emulation Station. The process of setting up Emulation Station through EmuDeck is reasonably simple if you follow a decent guide, and I used the one from Retro Game Core, although it did take me a little while to get all the correct BIOS files for the PS2 games to work, and there's a bit of looking around on your own, should we say, in order to get things functioning. My advice is, if you can, plug it into a monitor with a mouse and keyboard and just use the Steam Deck as if it were a computer. It makes things far simpler. Luckily for me, it happened to work flawlessly with my work setup. So the monitor that I run with my work laptop has a HP USB-C dock, and I just plugged it in to try it and it worked absolutely perfectly first time. Thus far I've only used that for setting up the systems and getting the games loaded onto the Steam Deck. I haven't actually used it to game on. Everything I've played has been handheld. As far as getting games to run smoothly, well, that's another story entirely. Take Burnout 3 for instance. I can run it on 2x resolution with widescreen hacks enabled, although it is a little bit stretched, but I'm happy with it, and it runs completely flawlessly. Yet Splashdown I can only run if I'm not bothered about having water in the game, which for a game that's set primarily on water seems a little bit silly. And this is kind of how it's gone for me. Trial and error across a bunch of systems to see what will work and what won't. I've done some amount of tinkering to get things working, but I haven't been able to get every game that I wanted to work. Although probably with enough time and enough Googling, eventually I would be able to get them to run fine. Ultimately, it depends on how much time you want to spend tinkering. Do you want to get as many games to run as possible on that device, but kind of not have time to play them? Or do you want to play them and then add new games as and when you run out of things to play? For me personally, I thought rather than spend the first 2 months just setting the thing up, I started to play some games, and I will probably add some more games and try and fix the ones that won't work as time goes on. I may be late to the party and I may have only just scratched the surface, but I can tell you I am loving the Steam Deck. It is currently my console of choice, and I can tell you that in the first 2 months of ownership I've used it far more than I have my Switch in the last 6. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.